Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Christian Commentary Podcast. First of all, my friends, how are you doing? Are you hanging in there? Are you getting enough rest? Are you staying hydrated? Are you doing your mindfulness exercises? Because listen up. If you are living in the United States in the year of our Lord 2025, there is a lot that is being asked of us right now as individuals. Not only do we have to live life and make a living and take care of our loved ones, but if we want to stay just remotely plugged into what is happening in our country and in our world, we essentially have to become our own personal information analysts. I talk about this a lot. I wrote a whole Substack on it with tips and tricks on how to do this. I talk about it in my Jojo Siwa episode. I talk about how we need to resist the outrage industry, which sensationalizes things for profit. But it goes beyond that. In order to make good assessments about what's going on, and therefore to make good decisions about what we need to be doing, we need to look at issues and events and topics from multiple perspectives. It's non-negotiable. It's essential. Perspective is everything. And this is already difficult in the era of algorithms, in the age of polarized media and messy information spheres. But it's also more difficult when we have a federal government like we do right now, who is going out of their way to limit our access to information and perspectives that were available to us just a year ago. I am talking about the fact that 8,000 web pages have been altered or deleted by this current administration, including 3,000 data sets. And it's one thing if the administration wants to add their perspective, but it's another thing if they want to delete this information from the Department of Education, the Department of State, the CDC, Department of Health and Human Services, the Social Security Administration, the National Park Service, the Small Business Administration, and the Department of Veterans Affairs. And they're doing this to information and pages that they believe are connected in some way to DEI or any topic that is like remotely adjacent to these. So Black history, LGBTQ history, women's history, environmental issues. I will say that again, 8,000 federal web pages and over 3,000 data sets have been erased from public access, and with it, not just the information, but the perspective. And you can say, well, whenever a new president comes in, they're going to update some things. Yes, it is routine for administrations to make some changes to government websites when they come in that align with their policy goals. But let me tell you, we have not had any other president in the internet age who has engaged in the kind of systematic purge that this current administration has done with these web pages. Biden changed a couple hundred pages. Obama actually combined a lot of web pages from the Bush administration. There were like 24,000 websites for the government, and he consolidated them. He made like less websites, but he didn't delete any of the information. He combined it. So this kind of erasure, mass erasure of information is something that is unique to Donald Trump. And in his first administration, he deleted like 5,000 to 20,000 web pages over the course of 4 years. And we are not even done 1 year, and we are already over 8,000 web pages. And before anybody suggests that he's just removing some super duper woke stuff from the Biden administration, let me tell you, these deleted web pages go all the way back to George W. Bush's administration. And even, get this, 10 to 20% of these deleted web pages are actually from the first Trump administration. So it seems like even like Trump 1.0 was too woke for Trump 2.0. So in this kind of situation, not only do we have to go out of our way in our busy lives to fill the gaps of missing perspectives and missing information that are coming from these purges, we also have to become keepers of national memory ourselves. So we, the people, need to talk about the topics and remember all of the things that they are trying to make us forget. And Christian commentary is here to help, right? So I already believe in looking at things from different perspectives. I think it's a big red flag when the government is limiting our perspectives. And again, there's a range of topics that are being erased or altered or edited or censored. And then there's a kind of chilling effect that happens after that, where people are afraid to talk about these things because they don't want a lawsuit or anything else from the government, or they don't want to lose their federal funding or what have you. So in a situation like this, not only am I saying we have to do a lot of this perspective work, but again, we have to become keepers of memory. We have to remember the past, and in particular, the achievements of the people who they are trying to suppress. Now, I can't cover every topic in one episode, but one thing that Christian commentary is always very good at talking about is gay tea. So, in this episode, I am going to focus primarily on the LGBTQ culture and history that I think is being erased, in order so that we can use this as a kind of blueprint for how to keep these conversations going and how to remember these things. Now, I'm bringing on a fabulous guest who has been my friend almost my entire life, and who is a fellow keeper of memory. And we're going to talk about the things that we think everybody needs to know. And once again, whether you're part of the LGBTQ community or not, these are things that I think every American should know about our community and about our achievements. And again, this is an exercise in remembrance. How do we remember the things that the current administration would like for us to forget? Welcome to Christian Commentary.
Oh, America, land of the brave, but who will save the ones who crave freedom in a land so divided, where dreams and reality collided?
Okay, everybody, I am so happy to introduce my special guest today, the fabulous, the wonderful Kevin Durkin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm a longtime listener for the last, whatever, 3, 4 episodes. And yeah,
Five
longtime
now.
fan of yours in general. 5.
Well,
yes.
this is true. Now,
Yeah.
you and I, we've known each other for a very long time.
800 years. We have known each other
100
for
years.
800
It's been
years.
84
Yeah.
years.
Since the time of Mesopotamia, we've known each other.
Since the days of Gilgamesh. Yeah. Yeah.
It's indeed been epic. Yes, yes. Uh-huh.
But yeah, so we went to grade school together. We went to the same Catholic school, and then we went to high school together, the same
We did.
Catholic school.
Just festooned in Catholicism.
So
I'll
much
tell ya.
Catholicism, so much plaid, so much plaid. Then we met up again after I went to grad school, and we started doing theater together,
Sure did.
locally, regionally, and off Broadway.
Off Broadway.
We did that.
I have Kristen to thank for all of my New York performances, both
This is true.
off Broadway and my off Broadway.
That's right. We
debut.
did an off Broadway, and that was the last piece of theater that I think we both did right before the
Before COVID.
pandemic.
Yep.
And it was like the week before lockdown. And I remember us driving back in the van with the scenery being like, I wonder what's going to happen with this COVID thing.
Well,
that
I
keep hearing about."
didn't drive with you guys. I took the train in.
That's right.
And
you
I
did. Yeah.
remember distinctly being on a subway holding the railing while reading about this horrifying disease. And I'm like, maybe not the best thing.
Maybe
to be
not the best
doing.
practice. Maybe
Yeah.
not the
Maybe
best practice. Yeah.
Get your bare hand off of this, subway railing. Just a thought, Uh-huh.
Do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and your background? Because you have
sure.
many, many interesting things that you've done, including your own podcast, which we should shout out.
Yes. So I'm with our mutual friend who's also in our off-Broadway production,
Yes.
Bree Knight. Yes. Snaps for Bree.
Snaps for Bree.
brilliant performer and playwright.
Yes.
I had Kevin and Bree Save the World back in 2001, which was basically just us reclaiming the time we had lost due to COVID.
Yeah,
Um,
2021, not 2001.
did I say 2001?
I think so.
2001 was a good year for me, but that's a different
It
story.
was a
But
good year for me too.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was wonderful until September. It was wonderful.
Oh, that true. Not that was not
Stevie
great.
cut
But
that.
yeah. So our mutual dear friend Bree Knight and I had a podcast in 2021 called Kevin and Bree Save the World. And of course, Bree and I met through you because we
That's
did
right.
the off-Broadway production together. We just wanted to do something about basically us having like a comedy advice platform coming off of COVID, which was, such the worst of times,
The
right? And trying
worst
to
of
make light of
times. But I
trying to make
remember
life a little
listening to
better.
this podcast during
Yeah.
COVID, and in particular, I distinctly remember shoveling snow while you and Brie are in my ear, and I remember loving it because it was funny and it was
Yeah.
like really wholesome and it was like really helpful, and so I have
Yeah.
very fond memories of that podcast. So I hope that everybody goes and checks that out as well,
Oh, thank you. I
because
hope
it's
so
good
too.
times. And a little bit
Yeah.
about your background in the arts. Give us some cliff notes.
So I did theater all throughout high school, and then I thought I was going to be a film actor, so I went to college for acting. After about a year, I kind of was like, this probably isn't like realistic based on just feedback I was getting, whatever. But I started taking voice lessons my freshman year. And I stuck with that while I switched my major to English literature, which is what I ended up teaching later on. I have a bachelor's and a master's in English lit, with a particular focus for my master's on queer literature, basically post 45, but the 20th century in general was interesting to me. And I taught composition and rhetoric for a number of years at a few local colleges. In terms of the arts, really, even though I was not, studying it in a formal way anymore, which on all that formality anyway, I always loved it. And then after grad school, when I had just started teaching, I decided I was going to go back to voice lessons. And basically, I've been riding that wave ever since. I've been a freelance opera singer
Yeah.
on the side as
And you're
well.
really, really good.
Oh, thank you.
And I started getting voice lessons from you, in fact, because that is also a
We have to
thing.
start that again. We have
We
to
do,
start
we
that
really
again.
do. We really do. I was, Kevin, I was hitting
Kristen
high
is a great
notes.
singer.
I
Yeah.
was hitting high notes that I didn't even know I had. And I have been
Yeah.
singing for a long time. I've been taking voice lessons for a long time, but you
Yeah.
unlocked parts of my range and I was singing I was being an Italian diva. I was living my best life. You know what? We'll get
Yes.
back into it. So if anybody
Yes.
listen, this is like a free commercial for you, but I'm like, listen, if anybody
Oh,
in the area wants to get some good voice lessons, some like really accessible
please.
voice lessons,
Please. Come.
this is the
Yes.
guy. This is the guy.
Oh, you're the
Yeah,
best.
so you are like me, a
Hmm.
keeper of memory, is what I
Yes.
think that a lot of us scholars and historians are. We read the literature, we sing the songs, we read the plays, we put the plays on stage, which is its own form of
Yeah.
archiving.
Yes.
And that when the world forgets, it is our job to make sure that they don't. Here we are in this situation now where so much culture is just disappearing. It's being erased. It's being drowned out by the many, many options, the algorithms. We have so many things that we're competing with, and now we've got a federal government who is out here scrubbing pages off the internet and deliberately trying to erase memory. And there's this kind of freeze effect that also happens with it because now you have schools and other organizations that don't want to talk about things. Certain
Yeah.
topics are just off limits because they're afraid of getting sued, they're afraid of losing their funding, and it's creating this new culture of silence. So I wanted to do this episode, and I reached out to you, a fellow
Hmm.
keeper of memory. What
Hmm.
should we be remembering right now? What should we make sure that people do not forget, particularly about queer culture, queer history? And of course, when I say queer, I'm using that phrase as a kind of umbrella term. So, what is it that we need to know? What can we salvage in these 45 minutes?
A big part of my work in grad school was especially about archival stuff and looking at the archive of queer life in maybe not the most traditionally studied places. I mean, where
Yeah.
do we think of when we think of queer life? Major cities, right?
Right. Right.
That's what people go to immediately. You know, you go to San Francisco, you go to New York, Philadelphia, Paris, the sort of Berlin, of course,
Right. Of
London.
course.
But I was fascinated by, for me and for us, where we were from locally, right? And sort of
Yeah.
the queer life that had existed here in times past. And
Yeah.
there was a bar that used to be open in Norristown, which you might remember
Yes.
very well, called the Beagle
Yes.
Tavern. The Beagle Tavern, I
Yes.
had many, many good times there for
Yes. So
many
many fond
years.
memories.
And that was a great sort of meeting ground for people who were not, I mean, we're lucky that we're very close to a major city, but
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe for people who weren't either able to get there very easily, you
Yeah.
know, now coming to the history part of it, right? So a large portion of the clientele there had been patrons at this small gay bar called the Lark Bar, which was in
Hmm.
Bridgeport, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And that kind of became a basis for my fascination with, you know, kind of local queer history,
Yeah.
right? I've tried to find as many kind of oral histories of this particular place as I can. And ultimately, it was like so many of these places created as a space for people who didn't want to go into Philadelphia, like Olga Adams. She and her husband Bob owned it
Hmm.
and opened it as a place, basically just a normal bar that became this refuge, this meeting
Mm.
place for queer
Yeah.
people. She said it was for those people who didn't want to go up to Allentown, which of course was a
Right.
major town, and this was in the 1950s when it
Hmm.
opened, right?
Hmm.
Or into Philadelphia, which in both of those places it could largely be unsafe, you know, for
Yeah.
them, whereas this
Hmm.
because they weren't as suburban, and there was a
Yeah.
safety in the suburbia of a place like
Yeah.
Bridgeport. Sorry, I'm rambling a lot about this particular topic just because for me this is the kind of history that I find fascinating
Yeah.
when thinking about where we're at currently. A place like this provided a meeting ground for people who maybe didn't have anywhere else to go. Well, definitely didn't have anywhere else to go. I mean, to meet
Right.
this easily, right?
Absolutely.
For me, there's a personal connection because my mom's entire family is from Bridgeport,
Hmm.
Pennsylvania, and she
Yeah.
always spoke
Yeah.
of it as this sort of mysterious place that they didn't really know what went on there, but they knew it was really cool and they all wanted to go there, right? So I guess that brings me to my first thing, like what's something, you know, in memory that
Yeah.
we could think about now. I'm not really much of a drinker or partier, and I never
Right.
was. But
Right.
there's an aspect to the queer bar space or
Yes.
that sort of space that I think has more or less gone by the wayside in even
Yeah.
like the neighborhoods
Well, I mean,
where
and
it's
lesbian
mhm,
bars just in
oh,
general have just,
tragic. There's a new
absolutely
one in
disappeared.
Philadelphia, though, I
There
believe.
is, and I'm very excited about that. So I'll be checking that out,
Yeah,
in the near future. But I
same. I
remember,
would
like, we
love to.
used to
Yeah.
have Sisters in
I loved
Philadelphia, and
Sisters.
then that
Yes.
shut down. And there really hasn't been very much of a replacement since then. I love starting the conversation with the gay bar. Because you're
Yeah.
right, it is something that I feel is kind of like we're losing it a bit. I had started going, when I first came out in,
Hmm.
the 2010s, like going into Philly and everything else like that. And it felt like there were a lot of straight people in these gay bars, a lot of bachelorette parties, and it didn't really feel like a queer space. By
No.
the time I stopped going, and I think that going to Pride this year, not only did it feel like a queer space again, but it was a much bigger community. Never seen it that crowded before in my
It was
entire
mobbed.
life.
It was
It
mobbed. I was
absolutely
there
was.
this
It was a
year as
lot of
well.
fun.
It was, yeah. And of course, I'm always horrified by how young everybody looks, but then I'm like, because you're not anymore. I'm like, they're not old enough to be here and they're
Speak for
fully
yourself. Speak
27.
for yourself.
I'm not young anymore, right? I like look around, I'm like, everybody here is so young.
The reason I wanted you to come on this program is because you and I come from the same place. We are both coming from a relatively conservative Catholic community, background, schools,
Hmm.
world. We came from a place that did not talk about this, where this information was not accessible to us. So we already like, a world where this information gets erased for people like you and me. This is not hypothetical. We have lived
Yeah.
this. We know what this
Yeah.
looks like, and we have survived this. And I'm not using that word lightly, but it seems like, your mom talking about Bridgeport and your access to these bars was kind of your first way in. Was there an earlier way into this, or was that your doorway?
I was lucky in a lot of ways because I came from a very liberal family.
Yeah,
It was
I did
more my
not.
I know. It was more my external life that was
Yeah.
so kind of infiltrated by because they were
Yeah.
still Catholic. I always
Yeah.
say if Kristen's family are like the really excellent Catholics, like my family were like the good lapsed Catholics who went like every 3 weeks and holidays. You know what I mean? But like my like grandparents on both sides were very devout. Yeah.
Of course.
I
Catholics in
yeah,
general are kind of split down the middle. It's kind of
yeah, I
50-50.
think so.
You've got like the
Yeah.
old school Union Democrats. You've got like the ones who are more socially conservative, so they gravitate more
Yeah.
towards the And that was my family because my family was those old school Union Democrats.
Yeah.
And then my parents were very socially conservative, very pro-life, and then moved closer into the Republican. I mean, but they were both Democrats when I was born. In fact, they put that they voted for Dukakis in my baby book. So, I mean, like
By
that's
the
how
way,
Democrat they
for all
were.
the listeners, I adore Kristen's parents.
I
So
do
they're like
too. I do
they're
too.
incredible people.
And they adore
They are
you. And they were like, "Oh, you're
oh
interviewing Kevin Durkin tonight." Tell him.
they're such doll. I love them. Um, but back to your original question, like the kind of
Yeah,
queer thing. I my first foot in, darling, I was a competitive figure skater when I was 10 to
that's
18.
right. That's right. I
so,
remember.
so let me tell you, it was just a natural progression, I think. But
There
no,
was no going back.
in many ways, my coming out was figure skating. By doing that in the Catholic grade school we were in, which was generally tilted very conservative, right?
Very right. Yeah. Yeah.
I and not really giving a what anybody said. That was kind of my first time coming out because I knew
Yeah.
why they were making fun of me because I already had. But I think that world also exposed me to the first gay people I had been around in my life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that that was kind of my first foray into it. And then, of course, you have the costumes and the music and the movement. It's all very thrilling,
Mm-hmm.
queer.
Mm-hmm.
And then after
Absolutely.
that, yeah, I think once I came out, my first time really interacting with the community in any meaningful way was through the gay bars. Yeah.
Because I mean, growing up, I was not allowed access to a lot of queer culture.
Hmm.
I was not allowed to watch Ellen, her
Mm,
sitcom or her talk show for the first couple years that was on.
hmm.
Um, if like Will and Grace, of course, was completely off limits. There was just a lot of things that
And isn't it amazing how tame these things are by
so
our standards
tame,
now?
so tame. Well, I mean, like, and if the people listening want like a story of hope here, is that I have since, I have come out to my parents. They have loved me and accepted me, and they have been so wonderful about it. And they've watched all these shows with me now as adults. So like watching Ellen's old sitcom from the 90s with my mom, watching Will and Grace, and she loved it because she gets all the references because it's a lot of theater references. But it also reminds me of there's this monologue in the play The Normal Heart by
Yes,
Larry
of course.
Kramer.
Hmm.
And the play is about the AIDS crisis. Yeah, it's devastating. By the way, like it has broken my heart. I've only ever watched it twice because that's I think all that I can handle, just because it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But I highly recommend. But there's this amazing monologue in that piece where the main character Ned is talking about the AIDS crisis, and he's like, we're not. He's talking about gay men, and he's like, we're not just these over sexualized creatures. He's like, we are culture. He says, I belong to a culture that includes, and he starts listing off all of these prolific gay men like Proust, Henry James, Tchaikovsky, Cole Porter, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, Alexander the Great, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Christopher Marlowe, Walt Whitman, Herman Melville, Tennessee Williams, Byron, E.M. Foster, Lorca, Auden, Francis Bacon, James Baldwin, and so on and so forth. And of course, Alan Turing, who invented the code breaker during World War II that helped us beat the Nazis. The only way we'll have real pride is when we demand recognition of a culture that isn't just sexual. It's all there, all through history. We've been there, but we have to claim it and identify who is in it and articulate what's in our minds and hearts and all our creative contributions to this earth. And I, you know,
Yeah.
that to me is what's at stake with this issue of cultural memory. When we get into this place where they start erasing people from our community and our achievements off of, even if it's just these federal websites, like they're erasing our achievements from
Yeah.
public memory. And in doing so, it enables them to mistreat us. Of course, the AIDS crisis famously, the Reagan administration did not take any action. Congress,
None.
it took them like what, 10 year, almost 10 years to start funding it properly. Thousands of people, mostly gay men, were dying. And and that's like kind of like where the monologue comes from is like, hey, maybe if people knew how much we've contributed to the world, they wouldn't be okay with all of us dying like this. We lost an entire generation of Broadway geniuses.
Hmm.
Michael Bennett,
Writers,
yeah, writers, musicians, Howard
visual
Ashman, of
artists.
course, who did
Oh,
Little
of
Mermaid,
course.
Beauty and
Yeah.
the Beast, Aladdin. And I think that there's something on his gravestone that says something like if he had one more song that he could have given
Oh,
us or something
what a
like
tragedy.
that. It's the fact that we lost this, and I talk a lot about cultural diplomacy and soft power in my first episode on the NEA, but part of the reason why I feel like American culture feels like it's falling behind and we have remake after remake and nobody has these ideas is because we lost an entire generation of gay men in the
Yeah.
80s and 90s, brilliant minds, creative minds who could have been those voices and then could have been those mentors. And there's just such a gap. So the last thing we want is for this to happen again. The last thing we want is for us to forget all of these accomplishments. I mean, like, even Tchaikovsky, like, we play the 1812 overture every 4th of July, and only a gay man could have written that.
Tchaikovsky is my favorite composer,
Mine
actually,
too. Mine
and
too.
yeah, I mean, largely because I love the ballet and so much of the ballet music
That's
that I
right. I
grew
do
up
love a good
listening to was of
ballet.
skating. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree and have made many of the same sort of claims that you're talking about now. I think that is exactly my issue with a lot of what I see. Fran Lebowitz, who is like one of my favorite human beings on the planet.
Yes.
If you don't know who Fran
Yes.
Lebowitz is, look
Look her
her up.
up.
She's a brilliant,
Amazing.
sardonic, chain smoking New York lesbian. She's just
I
everything.
want to
And
be her when I grow up. I was going to say,
mhm,
Kevin, who's your favorite lesbian besides me? It's Fran Lebowitz.
it's Fran Lebowitz. I don't know what else to tell you. It is just fully Fran Lebowitz. No stops. It is her. But
Yeah.
she says it wasn't even just the actual artists, it was the audience, the loss of
Yeah.
the audience. Because who was
Oh,
going
yeah.
to, and she used the example of ballet. She said it was these gay men who had been told they couldn't be dancers who really loved it, who would demand that these famous prima ballerinas gave so much in their performances, and the ballerinas were better for it as
Mm.
performers. And the quality, she said, has just absolutely slipped to where it's like it's unrecognizable now compared to what it was. And that's something, as somebody who studied, for example, anything within the arts, when I listen
Hmm.
to music, when I read, I think, why were certain things just of a different quality?
Yeah.
And I think because we lost an entire generation of people who were creating culture and art, an
Yeah.
entire generation, and then some on either
And then
end,
some.
right?
And then some. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I always say the reason that I love the place like the Beagle, the reason I love hearing about a
Yeah.
place like the Lark, these are the people who were, in the case of the Beagle, or may have been my mentors. And I don't,
Right.
somebody who outside of those experiences has not spent a lot of time with a ton of queer people. That's something I both cherished when I had it and miss very much. And I
Yeah.
also miss the things I never even had. I miss the fact that I didn't get to have somebody that I'm is like another father figure who's in their 70s now because
Right.
they're gone. So I feel like my own work, and I, not to blow myself up like I'm important in any way, but I mean
Right. Right.
I
You are
think like
important, Kevin
um,
Durkin.
Pshaw, thank you. But that good queer self-effacing nonsense. So I think that that's really what I want people to know is that, especially the younger generation who are wonderful in different ways, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm talking people who are, the generation just below ours, I suppose, or,
Yeah.
they kind of have these older queer mentors that
Yes.
I think our generation was the last one that wouldn't have gotten due to
Yeah.
AIDS, right?
Yeah. We are the elders now, and that is such a
That's a tough pill to swallow, I'll tell you.
I've been thinking about this a lot, especially this year, with the new state of things.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot about so my mom, when she was growing up, one of her neighbors, her best friend, was a man named Jeff who was gay. And
Look
he
at that.
look at that, right? Best Jeff Crosley. I was like, Mom, how did you not know? I mean, look at this man. And you know what she said? This is amazing. She said, well, he had a poster of Marilyn Monroe in his room. And I was like, Mom, listen to
Well,
yourself.
that's the number one sign,
It's the
really.
number
Yeah.
one sign. It's not,
It's
it's,
the number
you
one
know, it was
sign.
Marilyn. It might have been Cher, but it's like there's a
Yeah.
Madonna.
I
There's
have,
always,
wait. Oh, here she is. Hold on. I have a Cher Barbie doll in my room from when I was a child.
Stop. Stop.
In
See,
her, if I could turn
case
back
in
time.
point. I'm trying to
So,
think of the gayest thing I had in my room. I don't know. I'll think of it. Don't worry.
well, I also have, and my mom found this for me, even though it terrifies her. It was not even mine, by the way.
Yeah.
A ceramic nun. She's not
Love
in this
it.
room with me right now, but yes,
Love it.
because I do love a nun. It's a
I
Catholic
do. I
thing. I
mean,
don't know.
Sister
It's very
Act. We
specific.
grew up with Sister
Yes.
Act. Actually, that film was a bunch of
Hmm.
gay men. It was a gay Italian guy who
Shocking.
directed it,
Yeah.
right? A gay
Hmm.
Catholic like us who, and I think that that's one of the reasons why that movie has so much authenticity is because it was directed by this very Italian gay man who, again, unfortunately passed away of AIDS, but it had so much heart and it had so much authenticity, and the film is about outsiders in the church and this
Exactly.
almost like this kind of fantasy where they get welcomed and where their ideas get incorporated and where the church thrives because of it. It's like
Yes.
the biggest fantasy that Disney ever told is
Yep.
not the princes and the princesses, it's Sister Act, where they're allowed to sing secular music in a Catholic church. But also, I think because of the AIDS crisis, I think there was also this attitude of legacy that they
Hmm.
wanted to pass down. So we were getting some really high quality stuff across the board because unfortunately for a lot of them that was going to be their last
Their
project
last
that they
thing,
ever worked
right?
on. So, we were the beneficiaries. And so in a way, and this is I just thought of this, like we didn't have those gay mentors, but we did have the art that they created for us.
And their last pieces, which are usually the most risky, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I think when you have nothing to lose, you're going to put it all
Yeah.
out. Would Ashman have written a song like "Part of Your World," right?
But I
But
mean,
I mean,
Beauty and the Beast
I
was
know
the
that
one
was
where
his last one,
he
right?
was writing that on his deathbed, and you
Yeah.
get things like Kill the Beast, and you get things like something. I think the last song he wrote was Something There. I
Hmm.
love this idea of, like they knew that they could not mentor the next generation, which was us.
Yeah.
It was Gen X and it was us. So, in a lot of ways, I feel like they put their lessons in these works of art that now we have forever. And I'm actually kind of getting emotional because I think I just had this realization because I'm always like, like my mom's friend who was gay died of AIDS. That was a, gay uncle that I never got to meet. Like he died when I was 5 in the early 90s.
Hmm.
So I always think about how like what we lost and what we were deprived of, but I think I just realized what we've had all this time, which is very Wizard of Oz, which is super gay. The answer was always here
Oh,
with us all the
right.
time.
The answer was
Um,
always queer, right?
the answer was
Hmm.
always queer. And all we need to do is tap our slippers together. But the
Yeah,
answers
right.
have been, the mentorship has been with us through these
Yeah.
works of art that they left behind, through Sister Act, through the Disney movies, through whatever else.
One of the people I really wanted to talk about, in terms of like somebody I feel that more people need to know, is the artist David Bonarovich,
Hmm.
who was one of the people I focused my master's thesis on. He did visual art, but he also was a writer. And one of the works I used was a piece called "Close to the Knives,"
Mm.
which was all about. He calls it a memoir of disintegration. He was writing it as he was dying of AIDS.
Hmm.
Basically about his life as a queer person in a country that didn't want him alive,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the immeasurable weight of losing one person after another person after another person, and the pressure coming down on you
Yeah.
and what you're supposed to do, and then knowing your own demise is coming. But in writing about that piece, especially, I think because there wasn't a ton about him in general, like study wise, and if you have been in that fun world we call research, right? Like, when there's somebody who's not been as tapped into it, can be scary, but also pretty exciting because you're like,
Yeah.
you kind of get to make a lot of these discoveries first, um, or at least put them down. But
Hmm. Hmm.
it was such that I kind of almost felt like I was communing with him and with the people of his ilk and that he was around. One of whom was a good friend of his, actually was Fran Lebowitz. And that was how I discovered her originally, was
Yeah.
through him. One of the other people I focused on in my work was not somebody who was, her work was not necessarily, there wasn't like a ton of, like, she didn't have like specifically like gay characters, at least in what I was working at, but she herself was a bisexual punk rock incredible artist named Kathy Acker.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I remember very distinctly, again, this is the witchy spiritual side of me, having like a dialogue, a conversation with her as I was
Yeah.
writing about her
Yeah.
work. And what I love about her and what I loved about everybody I kind of focused that part of my academic life on was that I was looking at people who were taking these old white male straight dominated
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
letters. Acker
Right.
would literally take, like, she took the novel Great Expectations and just ripped it apart and rewrote it as a
Hmm.
queer
Hmm.
punk feminist
Yeah.
manifesto.
Yeah.
But not in the work that I looked at, which was called Blood and Guts in High School, which was so much fun. But she was very anti-capital, and she was doing these, like, midway through, you'd just be reading a page, then all of a sudden you'd see a drawing of a vagina. For you know what I mean?
Right.
It'd be like,
Right.
or something, these sorts of things. Like, it was just punk, and to me, that was a version of queer that I hadn't tapped
Yeah.
into, and
Yeah.
this sort of not really caring about being, acceptable. I think that that's something we see more now than we did when I was writing that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think that there's a certain excitement in being violently queer, as I call it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think both Vonarovich and Acker, they were two of the three that I wrote about, really did that nicely. And I think that they're kind of two of my, like, they're two of my mentors from afar, in a way,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think of them constantly when I think about politics right now.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
so my first advice would be, in order to connect to uh, pushing and rebelling in this day and age, is to read. I mean, to just give yourself a idea. It doesn't have to be long form. I mean, just look at what was, right? And I
Right.
think hearing people's experiences from the past gives me great solace in the present,
I agree. And I
especially
say
as a
this
queer
often.
person.
I say that queer history is, for us today, it's both a survival manual and a success blueprint.
Yeah,
And I think also probably that's one of the reasons why certain forces don't want people to know about it.
yeah.
And try to erase all of this because, and especially if you look at the AIDS crisis, I mean, like the way that they set up activism during that moment was just
Gay men and women
brilliant.
literally ended the AIDS crisis as we knew it, right? It would
It's
not
so
have been
true.
without them. They did it themselves. It was a guerrilla attack against our stupid government, right? Of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
time. And sorry, I don't mean to get too, I know
Well,
this is a bipartisan group that listens, but for me as a gay
yeah,
person,
yeah.
you have to understand it's
Well,
very
I
emotional.
would agree with you. I would agree because it
Yeah.
was a war. It was a
It
peop
was 100% a war.
thousands of people were dying. And like Reagan's press secretary literally laughed when people had the audacity to ask him this question, like, what are you going to do about this? And he literally laughed out loud.
Yeah.
Thousands of people died. And it was this dire situation where nobody, like, talk about, like,
Millions.
we say
Yeah.
this a lot today. We say nobody's coming to save us, right? We have to do this ourselves. Literally nobody was coming to save them because you had the people who had no idea what was happening. You had the people who didn't really care. And then you actually had the people who were in the highest echelons of government who believed that gay people deserved to die. were
Not just
even
believed,
legal.
wanted us to die.
Wanted
Why
is
do you think we
because
had so
yeah,
far fewer drugs than they had everywhere else? Because Reagan thought it'd be a good media tactic to have a bunch of gay men dead. And not just gay men, I mean intravenous drug users and
right.
black
It
people.
was a very convenient in the minds of some people. It was
Yeah,
a very convenient way. It was God, quote unquote, God's justice of getting
a
rid of
hundred
these
percent.
undesirable. So I don't disagree with your rhetoric on this at all. And I think that, no matter what your politics are today,
Yeah,
right? Republican, Democrat, like
yeah,
whatever it is. I mean, by the way, libertarians were the first party to embrace gay rights before Democrats or Republicans. But there was this idea that nobody is coming to save us. So the gay community and the trans community, under different labels at the time, right? We didn't have the same language, came together. And it was very DIY. And they had a wing of the activism that would do research on an entire wing that would just read medical journals to
yeah.
figure out what the latest information was. You had the people that were in charge of helping the sick because no other hospitals except maybe one would take these patients in. And they really had to look out for themselves because they didn't have anybody else. And like if to friends and family out there, if you're going to study one thing in LGBTQ American history, study the AIDS crisis. How the community met that moment. And it's kind of one of these things of like, again, we've been here, done that, survived. Today, AIDS is not the death sentence that it was. It used to be 100% death rate, and that is not the case today. And
AIDS is still largely incurable, but HIV is
yes,
largely
yes,
incurable, right?
yes, it's
To me, some of the best queer art came after these major moments of strife, or really in
yes,
any time of strife,
yes,
which is
yes.
why the 20th century for queer writing was much more interesting to me than
Mm-hmm.
the 21st century.
Yeah, yeah,
And there's been some good stuff, and I mean I like it because there's a lot more experimentation that can be done. It doesn't have to be
yeah.
maybe as covert or though I did love a good pulp novel from the mid 20th century, dirty, raunchy, lesbian, and gay male pulp. But I think in some ways, queer art is at its best when it is underground or being in opposition against something. If I can find one bit of peace in
One
all that's
silver
going on,
lining, one
I
silver
know that there's
lining.
going to be some really thrilling things artistically coming out of this from queer people,
Yeah,
some of which
yeah,
I've been a part of. And
yeah.
I did a queer operatic version of Romeo and Juliet, the
Love it.
opera, last
Love
year.
it. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I played Capulet as a gay
yeah.
nightclub owner. I mean,
Love
just something
that.
as like that is like to me what a thrill. Not because I think turning a straight story queer is so groundbreaking. I think we've been doing that for a
Right.
while,
We've done it.
but
Yeah.
doing it in an opera
Yeah.
in is a big thing because opera's stuffy. I'm excited if by anything by the fact that I feel like we've been in a fool's paradise for a long time. Maybe not the last time Trump was president, though I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
pretty inarguably it's worse now for us than it
Oh, it's
was
so
then
much
even.
worse. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, really from the time of Clinton being elected, I think there hasn't even through Bush, there just wasn't the same stripe that we're currently facing because
Yeah. Yeah.
what are
It's
queer people
yeah, we're
without the
going
arts and
backwards.
what has Trump done to the arts?
Oh, he just wants everything to be cats again.
I love cats, but I don't want it to just be cats.
I don't want it
Okay?
to just be cats. Cats,
No.
he wants to go back to the 80s. And one of the reasons why we had all of those British imports during the 80s is again because our people were dying. I
Hmm.
mean, I love Phantom, I love Les Mis. I mean, that was Les Mis
Well,
was the musical that we were in together in high school. See, I knew that we'd circle back to that eventually.
we sure did.
Um,
Lovely
so
ladies, smelling for
yes,
smoke. 7 days
that
of
was your
tea.
line.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was my
I
line.
was Madame Thénardier because I am a
And
funny
I
lesbian.
was. And I played any character they could put a little gay 14-year-old boy in.
I remember you said you'll have to go. I'll pay you off for the
I'll pay you off
day.
for the day. And yeah, that is the character of the farmer, I believe.
Yes, I think you got a good hand wave in there. Collect your bits and pieces.
So then,
Be on your
yeah,
way.
be on your way. Yeah, that's a yeah.
But yeah, you also
Uh,
had your cameo in Lovely Ladies. So let's recap first of all. We have gay bar culture, right? So
yeah.
I think that that's something that I encourage people to look into, and I encourage more people to go to bars and hang out
And honestly,
and find in-person community.
let's make our queer spaces queer again.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I even though maybe there's some it's getting better in some spots, it's still alarmingly not as queer as it was. And
That's true.
I
Yeah.
can tell you, Voyeur used to be one of my
Yes.
favorite bars in Philadelphia.
Same.
I wanted to say this
Yeah.
earlier
Yeah.
because that was where they had all the good drag shows. It was the late night
Yes.
one, which means that you could do all the
Yeah,
fun things you want there.
they were open until 3. They gave you free
Four,
hot dogs. 4,
four
yeah.
free hot dogs.
Karaoke down in that basement bar.
It was one of the queerest spaces I thought in
Yeah.
Philadelphia.
Oh yeah,
And
it
then I
was
went
wonderful.
one time less than 10 years ago. It was a frat party,
Yeah.
for lack of a better way of putting it. I
Yeah.
ran into one of my sister's college friends
Oh my
and
God.
who was decidedly not queer.
Right.
And all of her friends. And I said, this is oh, you guys are having fun. Maybe you should go to Hell at the Moon or one of those other bars because this is my
Right.
space. But anyway, no, I don't want to, I'm not I mean, listen, I would love to be violent and say, get out of our places, but that's not realistic. And I also don't care that much, but I think the dominant culture, I would love it to just revert back to what it was, and that's queer in queer spaces.
Find in-person queer communities, find in-person
Need
queer
it, need
spaces.
it.
You need
Yeah.
that face
Or
to
create
face.
one.
Or exactly, if one doesn't exist, make one. And
Yeah,
I mean, like, and
yeah.
we're in the theater. I mean, that a lot of times feels like a space, but
I was gonna say we don't need one because we're in the
we don't
theater,
need one
but
because we are one. We are.
everyone I know is gay, but for the rest of you,
But for the rest of you, I think reading, like
it's everything.
watching the films, reading, educating yourself, because again, like if the world is not going to do it for you,
Yeah.
going forth and start start with Leibowitz and just work your way.
And Leibowitz will give you everything you need about
Everything,
culture
it's
in
like
general.
kind of the portal. It's the portal to the rest of it.
But I
But
mean,
yes.
watch these old movies. I mean, there's so many good ones. I mean, I always think, I come from I love the highbrow and the lowbrow, right?
Yeah,
Un Chant
yeah,
Amour, this film by Jean Genet. The whole thing you can find online. It's like 25 minutes long.
right.
Jack Smith's Flaming Creatures. It's the first time really that people who were openly trans were on camera, and
Yeah,
in the sense of like this, or John Waters, his early films,
yeah, yeah.
especially these transgressive types. That's what we need people to be fed by again in the queer
Yeah,
community. Make the
yeah.
queer community fed by transgression again.
Because
Yeah.
they're gonna frame us as transgressive either way.
Well, it
So
doesn't matter exactly. I mean, I love Robert Mapplethorpe, but his stuff was not even remotely transgressive compared to these people, and he
yeah,
was the one they
yeah,
were banning. I mean, so
yeah. Break some rules.
break all the rules. Don't do anything like really
Don't do
illegal. But I mean,
it.
like,
No, we don't. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Within
yeah.
reason.
Things for
Follow the
Artie to,
laws, but break the rules.
There we go.
I'm gonna make that a
Title of app.
t-shirt. I'm gonna put that in the merch store.
And I mean, I know we're wrapping up, but I wanted
Yeah.
to. This is an anecdote from grade school that I think is important as
Excellent.
to why
Excellent. I'm ready.
queer history is absolutely vital.
Yeah.
My 8th grade teacher, who you can pretty much
I'll
choose between those three
surmise. I'll
people,
surmise. Yeah.
you know who it is. I'm not going to say
Yeah.
who it is. I'm not even sure if they're still alive. But anyway, said that you could get AIDS from sharing chewing gum with somebody because saliva spread AIDS.
My God. Like, what is
That's
this?
why,
1985.
folks, that's why knowing queer history and things that have plagued our community in the past, even on a very microcosmic level, is important.
Right.
It was so
right.
disgustingly homophobic, and even then I knew it was, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
And she also said, I'm also alarmed by all these men, hugging one another. Because this was the time of the metrosexual thing, right? She said
That's
men,
right. It
and
was the
I
early
believe
2000s.
it
Yeah.
was the early
It was
2000s,
the
she said, and
early
then,
aughts. Just
and
another
meanwhile,
thing that made
every
them
Catholic
insane.
church is designed by some gay guy and who's just throwing stained glass here. You know what I mean? And
Stained glass.
listen, every organist I know is a gay man. Okay, let me just put that one out there. There are
Yeah,
very
just
few. I mean,
and a lot of the hymns. I mean, there's that one gay guy that wrote a lot of the
a
same
bunch of the
hymns.
Catholic hymns,
I
yeah.
don't
And
remember
no
which
offense,
hymns.
I'm an Episcopalian now, and I sing for an Episcopal
Yes.
church who really cares about
Yes.
their music. Catholics aren't really known for their music, but
Well, it's because they alienated all of the gays.
it's because
This
they
is
didn't
what
want any
happens.
gays.
All
They
the
let them
best
design their homes, and
singers.
then they said, "You're not
Yes.
allowed to be here anymore." But let me tell you, there is nothing like the festivity from a gay heart of a
Yeah,
Catholic Christmas or Easter.
I agree.
You
I
cannot
said this in
recreate it
my
in any other faith the way
yeah.
you can in
My
Catholicism.
fifth episode just dropped today. If you're watching this, it'll be a week ago. But I say to my friend who's a Presbyterian minister, I say I will always, like, no matter how complicated my relationship with the Catholic Church is, I will always love the production value. So we have queer spaces, bring them back. Make
Bring them
space
back.
queer spaces queer again. Bring back a good. We need more piano bars. Just
Oh
saying. I mean, I
yes.
love tavern, but we need more. We need more piano bars.
I
Um,
want more bad drag. The drag queens have gotten
yes,
like
it's
too
too
polished.
good.
I want
It's too good.
terrible local drag
Yes.
queens and old drag
Yes.
queens is what I really
Yes.
want more of.
I want a
Yeah.
local queen. I want a piano
Yes.
bar. I mean, like, but
Yeah.
I think, yeah, more places like this, local. We
Hmm.
need the local queers, please. Educating yourself,
Yeah.
reading the literature, reading the plays, watching the
Yeah.
films. One thing we haven't really talked about is trans and non-binary people in that
Mm.
history because we
Oh
didn't
yes.
quite have the exact language that we have now. It was there. It was like being workshopped kind of
Yeah.
in the 80s and 90s. People were using they them in the 80s and 90s. People
And
were playing around
Zizir
with
and a number of these pronouns. And some of my favorite authors from my early sort of days were trans authors. I loved Kate Bornstein, who wrote Gender
Oh,
Outlaw.
yes. Oh my God, yes.
On
Yeah.
Men, Women, and the Rest of Us. Very important to my sort of queer identity in
Yeah.
the early
Yeah.
2010s. And then for history's sake, Susan Stryker, you can't be beat with
Yes.
transgender history.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, everybody talks about Stonewall, and Stonewall was A, not really a riot, and B, not really the thing that started gay rights the way
Right,
we know it.
right, right.
It was a number of events, and one of them was Compton's cafeteria riot,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
she has a documentary film she produced called Screaming Queens about that. So, I mean, I think tapping into history again shows
Hmm.
people that things are not that new, but
Yeah.
that in some ways they were better, in some ways they were worse.
I think that we are long overdue for a queer renaissance.
Yeah,
TikTok, I think that the situation is right. The wind is coming from the east, and I think that the conditions are correct for a rebirth, but we need to study the past in order to make
yeah.
that happen. And I want to thank you so much for coming on.
Oh my
This
God, this has been
conversation
such a
has been
treat.
delicious, and you're welcome back at any time. I want people to check out
Yay.
your podcast, Kevin and Bree Save the World. I want them to check out all the people that we've mentioned, and I want them to find these spaces and these communities. And let's make this renaissance happen. Like, let's remember so that we can rebuild. That's usually how it works. So
Yeah.
thank you, everybody. Thank you to Stevie, my video editor,
Thank
for
you,
all the
Stevie.
amazing work that they do, going through our conversations and making us
Especially
look
this
good.
one will be a real
Especially
treat.
this
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
And thank you, everybody. And I'll see you next
Thank
time. Welcome
you.
to Kristen Commentary.
Oh, America, land of the brave. But who will save?